Thank you for joining us today. This is Bill Baker at Firestorm. We're pleased to have you joining us for this webinar that is presented as part of the Crisis Coach webinar series with our good friends at RenWeb. Today's subject, we're going to be discussing anonymous reporting. We'd like to invite you to become our friend at Firestorm. Facebook Friends is Firestorm Solutions. Twitter, we're known as Firestorm Soul. There is a hashtag. That hashtag is Crisis Coach. Firestorm transforms crisis into value and empowers you to manage risk and crises. Firestorm expertise is crisis management, critical decision support, crisis communications, crisis public relations, and consequence management. Please keep in mind that the presentation today is not complete without accompanying oral comments and discussion, and the work product should be reviewed by your organization's personal counsel. In addition, keep in mind that the information provided should not be interpreted as legal advice or legal opinion. We're thankful to have RenWeb as our host and underwriter of the Crisis Coach webinar series today. Today, we're discussing anonymous reporting. Our presenter is the president of Firestorm, Jim Satterfield. We have as our host from RenWeb, Jacqueline Day. Jacqueline, over to you, please.
Yes, hi, my name is Jacqueline. Thank you for the introduction. I'm so happy to be with all of you today, and if you are back for the second part of this series, welcome back. I'm so excited to be on today's call. Firestorm consistently puts on really, really great webinars for this audience, and the information is so relevant and important, and I'm glad you can join us today for this particular topic. If you are interested in joining these webinars in the future, just keep an eye on your email. We send out regular notices of the next upcoming webinar, so just keep an eye out for that, and if you have any questions, feel free to contact Firestorm or me at jday@renweb.com. Once again, thanks so much for joining, and we hope you'll be back.
Jacqueline, this is Jim, and thanks for those kind words. You might want to underscore the user group meeting that's coming up in July, and it's a great opportunity to obviously network with the peers from all the other schools, and there are educational sessions, and there will be a special four-part breakout series around crisis management and crisis communications. So that's coming up at the conference in July in San Antonio. Anything else that people need to know about that conference, Jacqueline?
Yes, the dates of that conference are July 14 through 16, and that's the RenWeb Power Conference in San Antonio, Texas. And if you want more information about registration or reserving your rooms, anything like that, just go to powerconference.renweb.com.
And Jacqueline shared it's down on the Riverwalk, and for those of you who've never been to San Antonio, it's a nice place to go for a meeting, but the networking opportunities and the information you learn will just be a great opportunity there for everyone. This is Jim Satterfield. I'm the president of Firestorm, and glad to have been a part of this webinar series and sharing some information with you today. I think one consistent theme that we've seen in our discussions is, can you identify your organization's next crisis? We can. More importantly, we want to put you in a position so that you can. And we're not talking about just an earthquake or a tornado or even an armed intruder. There are a lot of things that can happen in our schools, and understanding what's going to be coming down the road, what's going to happen tomorrow, is an important aspect that we want to accomplish as we've been talking about it. In this three-part webinar series for this quarter, this is the second in the series, and we're going to focus today on anonymous reporting, and it's an area that historically we've not done as well in our schools as we would like to do about that. And so we're going to share some insights. We're going to show you what's working and what's not, where the breakdowns occur, and how you go about creating a culture of communications that supports that to occur within your school. And it boils down, if you want to look at the real question, is how do you know what you don't know? And as we've been talking about intelligence networks, we've looked at background checks. We've looked at having a program to understand behaviors of concern and recognizing them and having the different actions that you need to take. of having anonymous reporting associated with it, and then the monitoring of social media. And that becomes an important element because the things that are said on social media today will be in your school today or tomorrow. And so that becomes part of our goal to know today what will happen tomorrow. And we're going to go about this by following a predict, plan, perform process. And as our goals are focused around this, it's to transform uncertainty into certainty. And when we think about this, you've heard us use these terms of listen and look, and we're going to talk about that a couple of times today and more in our webinar next month as we continue the series. But if you really want to know what's happening, you've got to listen, and then you have to specifically look. Specifically was starting to be a tongue twister for me today as we go forward. Let's spend a little bit of time around these concepts of listening and looking. Listening is that general situational awareness that we have. It's the ability to look, if we want to think about on social media, streams. Streams are made up of phrases, and phrases are made up of words. If we think about school and gun, that's an example of a phrase that you might want to be aware of to see what that means and who's involved. Once you have something that you are aware of, a general situation that's occurring, then we take a much closer look. We actually go back, and it's a targeted awareness. And we can set up a geocoding and looking at what's happening in a particular area. We have the sphere of influence. Who is this person of interest communicating with? And then we even have the ability to go back in time and look at what was happening earlier in those particular areas. I'm going to give you an example outside the school area. Then we're going to come back and bring it into a school environment. Firestorm does crisis management, as Bill said at the very beginning, and we have a Fortune 10 company, a very large company, and we looked at one of their distribution centers, and we set a geo fence up around that to look at the postings on social media and texting that was coming out of their distribution center. And we identified an employee there, and he was in comments that he was making out in the public arena, and found that he made 80 postings in one 8-hour shift. So it would lead you to say, gosh, this guy must not have a lot to do if he could do that. And in fact, one of his postings was talking about how bored he was. But he went on to talk about the fact that he was having a problem with his supervisor, and apparently there was this was a racial problem. And as it continued on, and you looked at the postings during the day, and remember, he's sharing each of these with hundreds of other people. And the last one that he said was that, well, the only way that he was going to resolve this was he was going to have to bring a gun to work tomorrow, and he'd settle this. Well, if that was your company or your school, would you want to know that someone was, A, having a problem, as he indicated he was, but B, was planning to bring a gun into your school tomorrow? That's an important element to be aware of. So if you have an intelligence network, you can pick this up. Now, I was talking about social media. What has that got to do with anonymous reporting? Well, the statistics here are as follows. 80% of the time, someone else knows, and 66% of the time, 2/3 of the time, 2 or more people know. And that's what we're looking for, is one of these people to come forward and share the information that that they see a behavior of concern, so that you can take steps and actions. And it could relate to the brand of your school, the reputation. It could relate to the safety. It could be a substance abuse problem. It could be a domestic violence problem. It could be a sexual harassment or molesting, or it could be bullying, or it could be violence. Those are all elements that we would need to be aware of. And so we can use social media to go back, and then once we have a person of interest, to validate what we were told is true, and then start to understand it more. And we'll continue to show you more about that in future webinars. But today we're going to try to zero in on that part of the intelligence network that's the anonymous reporting. Last month we talked about behavioral risk threat assessment. If you missed that, all these webinars are available on demand and part of the program that we're doing together with RenWeb. But I'd want to draw your attention to that box that says crisis on it, and the definition there: a risk event for which one has not identified the vulnerabilities and exposures, has not developed a plan, and therefore does not know how to respond. that someone in your school community knows that there's a problem. Someone in your school community knows that there's a behavior of concern. What we want to do today is talking about how do we get them to communicate that to you when there's a reluctance. Snitch has a bad connotation associated with it. The phrase, I'm going to tell on you, as one child tells another, has a negative concept. So we want to change this into seeing and sharing, and we're going to talk about that some today. But I want to underscore this concept that people know. Look at this quote that came from a teacher. I knew when it happened that that's probably who it was. And I took the teacher's name out, referring to her former pupil. I would have been shocked if it wasn't. The concern here is this person knew there was a potential for an issue and had not come forward. That's a horrible position for us to be in, not only for the damage to our school, but the violence that could occur to one of our students or one of our staff and faculty. Remember that number. 2/3 of the time, 2 or more people know. Now we have to talk about creating an environment to come forward and share that information. Now, when we look at anonymous reporting, and we look at that, and we're going to look at it on a national and a local basis and start to carry this through, the first thing that comes to mind is 911. And America's done a great job of getting everyone to know you're in trouble, call 911, and the police or the fire, the medical staff will come. And we're very blessed in America to have individuals and first responders who will run toward the gunfire or run toward the fire to make a difference. And recognizing when you put that call in, the event has already occurred. They're just responding to it. That's a difference. We want to create anonymous reporting so that someone comes to us before the event has occurred, back when it's just that behavior of concern. Now, Firestorm does planning, as you all know from our previous webinars, and working with companies and organizations, and we're a fairly large employer of retired Secret Service agents. And one common statement they make is that when seconds really matter, the police will be there in minutes. When seconds really matter, the police will be there in minutes. And because it takes them time to come. But if the event's already occurred or in the act of occurring, that's why we do plans and drills and training on fire, on armed intruder, on lockdown, lockout, shelter in place, evacuate. All of those elements are coming in with the standard protocols. And that's a good thing because those things then buy us the time for this help to come. There is a concern with 911 that we're starting to see with the emergence of cell phones, in that it makes it sometimes harder to identify where the person is. With the old landline phones, it was very accurate. But now with cell phones, people are mobile. We had a tragic 911 call episode just recently in Atlanta where someone was right on that line between 2 counties. And the car had been driven into the lake, and as the car was going under, the driver was calling the 911 center, and they couldn't figure out exactly where they were. Because it was a cell phone and right on the line and the wrong, or picked the signal up and sent it to the wrong 911 center. And by the time they figured it out, it had taken 20 minutes and the person drowned. So there are limitations with what 911 does, but clearly we've done a great job in training. If there's any doubt, you're going to pick up the phone and call 911. Also, nationally, we see what Homeland Security has been doing around the if you see something, say something, and thinking about terrorism and violence associated with that. And it really started with the program out of New York City right after 9/11, and now it's become a national campaign supported by Homeland Security. They really launched it in 2010 as it carried forward. But we're not getting thousands of calls every day. We're going and asking people to call, and we get some, but not all, and we're missing information that's out there. So it's the feeling that, well, it's somebody else's job to call. Somebody else knows. I'll let them do it. There used to be a series of cartoons in the paper called Family Circle, and the little boys and girls within it, it was never them, it was somebody else. And the somebody else syndrome has been a limitation here. There's also been some fear that maybe it's not an anonymous reporting aspect, and so therefore maybe this is a conspiracy or a problem, we'll always have those individuals. I would encourage you to learn more about it. Just go to the Homeland Security website, and you can see I clipped some of the information that you see there from it. But if you look at to the right of your screen, it does give you some good ideas. You want to know who or what you saw, when it occurred, and why is it suspicious. And if we're thinking about getting anonymous reports in, that's the kind of information. You also see there the statement that if it's an emergency, you call 911. So we've talked about emergencies. We've talked about the see something, say something. What about the school marketplace? After the events at Columbine, the state of Colorado set up a program called Safe to Tell. And it's actually staffed by a 911 center, and it encourages students to send the information in. By the way, when we use the term Columbine, everybody immediately jumps to the shootings that occurred, not to the fact that it's the state flower of Colorado. But you see here that there's an attempt here to assure that it's anonymous, so that it's safe to share, because there's some concern about, well, somebody will find out that I'm the one who told and I'll get in trouble, or they'll pick on me, or that's a snitch and I don't want to do it. But they're branding and effectively trying to carry the concept of make a call, make a difference. And this is geared to public schools in the state of Colorado. But there are a couple of problems here, and I want to point those out as we talk about it. Look in the center of your screen where you see the word disclaimer. Should Safe to Tell become the victim of prank calls, the line will be forwarded and traced with law enforcement notified immediately. Well, that's telling me that this isn't anonymous, that it's going to cause a reluctance. And if you create an anonymous reporting system, one of the things you want to be able to do is to assure that the person is anonymous in coming through, because people are looking for a reason for this not to happen. One other shot from their website, and this is a good job, they started to tell you about why you should tell, why you should come and share this information. And the types of risks that you see and exposures and threats that are listed here: alcohol, drugs, sexual assaults, gangs, violence, bullying, all of those suddenly come up as an issue why someone would want to call the line and share that information. That's a pretty good list that comes together. Now, I gave you some numbers just a few minutes ago, and you'll notice those are the two statistics that I showed you there in red. And the word leakage is used. That's the idea that somebody knows something and that information comes out, and that becomes very important. But when you look at some of the other statistics on the screen, 75% felt bullied, 60% were depressed, 75% were suicidal. Those all are behaviors of concern. So that means that if someone saw that behavior, they would know what the warning signs were, and then they could make a call to share that out. So that's part of a program. So if you're going to do anonymous reporting, you also want to have a program around behavioral risk threat assessment and having the behaviors of concern trained with all of the school community, the parents, the students, the teachers, so that they know when they see this that they should share that information. Now, as we carry it forward and think about these warning signs, almost every disaster, incident of workplace violence, and act of terrorism was preceded by warning signs. But you have to know what you're looking for, and then you have to share that with someone else. If you don't, that opportunity will be lost. And we'll talk more about that in a few minutes. All of this comes up to talking about you need to build a culture within your school that it's safe to communicate, that it's expected, that there's a benefit here, and that we're all helping each other. We all have each other's back. So let's delve a little bit more into the word culture. It's the beliefs, it's the attitudes, the values that give your school community its unique personality. You're about helping people, creating empowerment, growth, spiritual values, moral values, ethical values that are here. That defines your school and gives it its unique personality, the types of students that you're looking for within your school. And the culture defines how there's freedom in decision-making, how everyone's treated, the information flow, the business dealings. And this whole culture is really timeless. It's not going to change this year to next year. You've set your school out, and that's one of the things that we're excited to talk to independent schools because your culture is so unique in what you bring and the values that you support as you come together. And it's not always written. It could be on the website, and certainly as you look at your mission statement and as your board and your head of school has set those tones, there's some unwritten rules and norms that occur there. But if we're going to think about creating a culture of communication, let's focus on why sometimes that's difficult and why some of these programs haven't worked the way that they were designed. Some of the failures come that it's been a top-down approach, that we will communicate. I remember the movie from decades ago, Cool Hand Luke. Perhaps you remember it. And the head of the prison farm there, as he was having problems with Paul Newman, the inmate, said, what we have here is a failure to communicate. And we find that all too often, that the culture has to be assembled to do that, and it can't be just a top-down edict. It has to be understood by everyone in the organization. You've got to assemble the tools. If you want to have suggestions coming in, there has to be a suggestion box. If you want to set up a website to do that, or a phone number that would call in, or if you're going to be monitoring social media and capturing that intelligence that's on that side, you have to have the tools to do it. If you don't have the tools, you're not going to have the outcomes that you're there. And we've seen it where it's always speaking and not listening. Communications is a two-way street. Did our message go out? Was it understood? And if someone's trying to tell you something that will make a difference in the life of one of your students, you want to be ready to listen and receive it. This can lead to frustrations in the organization when this doesn't describe the culture of communications that you have. And it becomes very obvious when people aren't really buying into that area. And it's got to fit the culture of your school. And so an anonymous program at your school may be slightly different than an anonymous program in another school as we carry over. Now, we have a lot of schools on our call today, as we always have when we do the webinars. And we were kidding a little bit. It was starting to be an ecumenical movement when we looked at all the range of groups of schools that we had out there that are in attendance. Well, every one of those schools has a unique culture in how we would structure this. So what are our ultimate goals? Obviously, we're talking a lot about culture, so that as we create an anonymous reporting program and a culture of communications, it has to align with what our school is and how we do it. It has to have an embedded sense of preparedness so that everyone feels that they have to share the knowledge that they have, because that's going to help us be prepared, and so that we don't have someone who's in trouble, someone who's experiencing pain, someone who has a problem at home with domestic violence or some other element, that it's safe to bring that information forward. So instead of trying to just have a communications program, we're going to send an email out and tell everybody you must communicate, or send out an announcement in the school newspaper that we have a program. It's building a culture of communications, that we're going to share this, and we'll talk about testing that at the very end of our presentation today. So you've got to listen and look. We've used those terms already today. We're going to continue to use those as we expand this and sharing that with you. But you have to listen, and then you have to look. You've got to create an intelligence network combining all these things. And so our goal is to know today what will happen tomorrow. That's what we talk about when we talk about creating a culture of communication. So the question was, how do we go about doing it? We want to seek and understand what's in existence today. What do you already have that's working? You want to keep that in place. If it's not working, where is it not working? How do we change it? How do we bring it? It starts at the top. Yes, the head of school, yes, the board has to desire to change a culture. So if it's not a two-way environment, if it's not one where people feel safe in sharing, then we have to change it there. We'll have to guarantee them confidentiality. We have to know that we're not going to overreact when a statement comes, and that we're going to respond in a timely manner. And we'll talk about time sensitivity in just a few moments. You've got to keep the strategy simple. If it becomes complex, that somebody's got to fill out a 10-page form, they're not going to do it. If they've got to remember some unique way to get it done, it's too much trouble. It's not there. It has to be simple to make it occur. I would recommend that you start to survey and do some interviews with those in your school to understand how they feel about the culture of communications in the school. Is it one way? Is it two-directional? Is it safe to share what they know as they come together? If we don't understand this, then it'll result in a failed effort. Culture can't be ignored. So you want to maintain relationships not only with school leaders, the staff and the teachers, the head of school, but with the student leaders themselves. They're going to be a source of key information that will come back. And remember, as our leadership change, it's going to have a direct impact on our culture in our school. So if you have a new head of school, it's going to be a different environment from where it was before. So can we really predict a crisis? And the answer is yes, we see it all the time. And if you're not seeing that, then you're missing this opportunity, and it's forcing you back into that situation where you're reacting to an act of violence, or you're reacting at that point in time, and because we missed those warning signs. Knowing the warning signs are extremely important, and we'll be talking about those as we continue in future webinars. You go back and look at the webinar from last month, and it will talk about a behavioral risk threat assessment program. There are always indicators that were developed in the process, and if we can start to train people to look at those indicators, then we see that there are patterns of them that will tell us frequency, how often will this problem happen, and severity, how bad is it going to be. The real value in identifying these indicators pre-crisis is that we can find the crisis before it happens. It's much easier to deal with it than where we were talking about the gentleman in the warehouse is going to bring a gun tomorrow to work to deal with a supervisor. And if we can deal with it beforehand, we have a heightened element of success. So awareness. Everybody in your organization must understand the warning signs of behaviors of concern. That's part of establishing the communications process. We can't expect people to pick up the phone and call us on an anonymous tip line if they don't know what it is that they're looking for, and recognizing that threats and statements of intent to cause harm are unacceptable in our school. If you hear this, this is certainly something that we want you to share so that we can intervene, because these behaviors of concern means that that student is exhibiting behaviors that we need to have an intervention with. By the way, it could be a teacher just as easily as a student as we talk about this in coming together. Now, predictable intelligence, which you've now seen this and you see the behavior of concern, let's talk about that a little bit more. Communications is the most perishable form of intelligence. If you knew something in July, you know what? If you wait to tell me in February, it's too late. Whatever was going to happen has happened. It's into that process. Similarly, if I see something today, and if I share it today, then there can be an intervention. There can be actions that can be taken. There could be other intelligence forms that we can look at to understand how severe or how much risk that's associated with this that can happen. Communication is the most perishable form of intelligence. We can know that even if we're just doing an announcement, if there's a fire in the building, you can't wait. You have to get that information. People have to know what they need to do right now, not later. Now, when we think about predictive intelligence, it's hard and soft data. Soft data would be those things about the actual human behavior that's seen, the intuition, the experience to be able to say, you know, that just didn't quite seem right to me. Hard data would be things like emails, social media postings, and admonitions of intent. Those are hard. And the good news here is technology can help us to understand it. There are tools that can search on the Internet to find out who's saying these things and who else are they saying them to and who else knows to start to improve it. This is part of a continuous improvement process within your school to much better understand those aspects of it. And we'll do another webinar to explain in detail about how that software works. And that information is in the public domain. It's just as if you had set up a video camera to monitor an entrance into your school. You could see who's at the door, who's about to come in. Well, that information is out there. We found a school with a picture of a student in a math class who had a gun and was showing the other students in the school the gun. Well, 34 students shared that picture among themselves. that means that there were 34 students who knew that there was a student with a gun in a classroom. Wouldn't you want one of them to have come forward? Unfortunately, not one of them did that, because there wasn't a culture of communications within that school, and there wasn't a safe way for someone to share the information, so it didn't happen. Luckily, we saw it on social media, and we were able to alert the school to take action early before the gun was fired. But the blending of those types of tools, the blending of social media to verify and then to determine what's been reported anonymously, is extremely important within your school. And then finally, when that information comes together, you need to have a central repository that it's going to go to one particular point and to be processed. That could be your counselor's office, it could be your HR, it could be an assistant leader on the school, but someone to be able to process it, because you take this fact here, that observation there, and this other statement here, now you piece it together and you can see a pattern, and that's where those indicators become important, and that's a part of this and how it comes together. So let's talk a little bit about going through and how we create this culture. First of all, you have to assure confidentiality. If there's not an assurance of confidentiality, people are not going to share what they see. And I think that's an important area that we want to assure, as we pointed out on the Safe to Tell, where it's clearly not anonymous. That's a problem, and that's an issue for you to be carrying that on. You also have to do education and communication around a snitch mentality. Some people are not going to want to do that because, if you tell, that's bad. Well, what we want to do here is to make sure that we're sharing, not telling, and sharing there in the community and the preparedness and the values of our school. That's why we started this discussion around the culture that's present within your school. That has to be an issue. You have to address it, and it has to become a part of the program. A suggestion box is certainly a good addition into this. That's the simplest form of anonymous reporting. It has to be in an area where a student could drop something off without, being seen by the office or the leadership that's in it. But if you do a suggestion box, you're going to have to check it regularly, because if that information comes in, remember the perishable aspect of communications, someone has to be checking it and responding and taking action. And it's a piece of information. What's written there may be misunderstood, it may be incorrect, it could even be a lie. But it is a piece of data and information. That's why the other tools that we have, understanding the behaviors of concern, separating it into guarded, elevated, and severe, of going and looking at what's being said on social media, who is involved in this sphere of influence that's being associated with it, those are all additional tools. The confidential phone number that can be called makes a difference. We're working with one state association now of independent schools establishing an anonymous reporting phone line that all the independent schools in the state can use together. Or maybe you want a unique one just for your school. It could come in to an answering machine or to an answering service, but having somebody there that has the ability to take the call and respond. Text, today we go out to dinner and you can see teenagers sitting at the table texting each other at the table instead of just saying, could you pass the salt associated with it. If your anonymous reporting doesn't include text, you're missing an opportunity to have a great deal of communications coming in. There needs to be a simple app that's downloaded, and that becomes the vehicle that allows them to use the app either for text or phone. You could even have a portion of your website that someone can go there and send you a message and establish an environment to do it. The more of those elements that you have, the simpler they are, the more reports that you're going to get and a better understanding of it. There has to be some surveillance detection, something that sets us with the out-of-place behavior. We've already talked about people understanding that's a behavior of concern, or sharing it, or looking on social media and monitoring there where you might get the first indication, and that puts you in a position to go back and learn more to understand it. Access controls of who has access to this information when you get it from the anonymous reporting, that the security is going to be around keeping it confidential, and the person who comes forward is protected. Dealing with visitors, HR policies and procedures. Background checks, again, are not just when you hire people. They're to be done annually to maintain that. Another part of your intelligence network, and looking at what's being said on social media will become important. And one of the reports that you got on anonymous reporting could regard a teacher and what's going on and what's happening. You've got to train your workforce, you've got to train your students so that to see something, say something, to see and to share is really the element that we're talking about here. We encourage you to have a strong relationship with local law enforcement so that if you've identified a behavior of concern, you don't have to wait until the guns got to school to have the support and help so that we can start to attack that lag period from the time you call to when help arrives, that we can call it pre-event, and also having resources outside of the school, a psychologist or a forensic psychologist that can opine on this to carry it together. Now, the last one is one that I would be willing to guess that no one on the call has ever done, and that's testing your plans around anonymous reporting and behaviors of concern. We test our fire drill plan on a regular basis. We can go into lockdown and armed intruder drills and practice those particular things. But we don't test, are we being told what people know? I would encourage you over this school year to design a test, to have some information come out, and see if that information comes back to you, to see if people recognize that as a behavior of concern and that, in fact, you gain the knowledge that you need to know within it. Because my guess is that things are going on in your school that you're unaware of. No matter how good your school is, no matter how religious your school is, no matter which faith that you support with the activities that you have, there's been a reluctance for people to tell. That tell has a negative word associated with it. But behaviors of concern are appearing every day. We just need you to be aware of them to move that earlier. So test your plan. Prove that, you know what, we do have a culture of communications here. Our students saw something and they came forward and shared. That should give you more confidence in going forward. It'd be good reassurance to the parents of your students and to the classmates that they all have, that they're in that area. It comes down to, do you want to know what will happen tomorrow? I think you do. I think you need to. I think you're expected to. And the question I would ask you is, can you afford not to know? None of us wants to be the person that picks up that phone and calls a parent and say that your son or your daughter won't be coming home from school today as a result of something that occurred. Firestorm responds to crises on a daily basis in schools and businesses around the country, and we've seen the impact that these can have. If you know in advance, you can make a difference. You can intercede, and that's really where we want to focus. You can contact us if you'd like to learn more about how you align your plans to best practices and where you are today. If you want to create your own intelligence network, or if you just got some general questions around this area, or to schedule some crisis coach training. And we just shared with you that there's going to be a training opportunity coming up at the user group meeting in July. And there are going to be 4 sessions that you could go through, so there'll be a track that you can send some of your team through to begin to get that information, or you can have a program done just for your school. If you want to know if your plans align to standards and best practices, you can contact us. This has been underwritten by RenWeb so that you could have an assessment of your school's plans, where you are relative to standards and best practices, or if you just want to talk about anonymous reporting or creating an intelligence network, we're glad to do those first steps for you. And our thanks to RenWeb for underwriting the cost associated with that. So we tried to fill in another element today about an intelligence network, and we focused on anonymous reporting. Jacqueline, anything you want to add about RenWeb or what we were talking about today? Because I know there's a lot of capabilities within the RenWeb system to be that central repository for the information that we were talking about today.
No, nothing I wanted to add, but thank you for the great presentation, and I appreciate you mentioning the Power Conference at the beginning of the call. And if anyone has any questions, they can feel free to reach out to me at any time.
And I think that we're talking today to RenWeb schools around the country. By the way, globally too. We have some of the RenWeb schools that are outside the U.S. We just finished doing a program for a school in South America, for example. There are features within that software that support this program, and particularly the central repository of being able to maintain that information and data confidentially as you secure it. I think that's an opportunity that you can talk with us and RenWeb and the other schools about how they're using the software that you've already invested in to run your school and support the culture that you have. At the end of the day, it's about the culture of your school, the values, the propositions that you're doing, and the way you're helping our young people grow. I'd like to thank you for what you're doing each and every day. It's a mission, and we can see the fruits of that labor as we carry forward. We've had questions that have come in. We're not going to be able to address all of those today on the call, but we're going to try to reach out to each person who attended the webinar today to answer your questions. I'll ask a Firestorm principal to give you a call and to see where you are and see how we can be of help to support that. You can go to firestorm.com to find out more information or to contact us. There are forms there that you can immediately do it, or you can send us an email at webinars@firestorm.com, or you can pick up the phone and call us at 800-321-2219. In America today, there are behaviors of concern. Those are in our private schools, our independent schools, and in our public schools. They're there. There are events outside our school that impact our students. There are concerns that come from the home into the school environment. There are threats and risks that are all around our young people today. It's our job to try to create as safe an environment as we can. There's an expectation of every parent that when their child goes to school that they're going to come home that night in the same condition that they shared with you. I think it's important that we establish an area where it is safe to tell. It is safe to share. And it's easy to do so, because you can't be expected to see everything that happens with every student 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. But the statistics tell us that somebody else knows, that over 2/3 of the time, 2 or more people know. The culture that we have in our school and the culture of communications needs to foster an environment where that person who knows comes forward and shares that information with you and has the confidence that, 1, it's going to be confidential, and 2, that it's going to be acted on. Because this type of predictive intelligence has a short shelf life. It has to be something that would be carried forward. Integrity matters, and it matters in every part of the lives of all of our students and our leadership. We've seen on the NBC and Brian Williams and the impact of that for this week, and making sure that we are saying the right story and telling the truth at every step along the way. There will be some pieces of information that come in through anonymous reporting that are not factual. We have a responsibility to everyone involved to research every report, come to an understanding, and make a decision. You have to have a process in your school that does it the same way every time, not just some of the time. Thank you for investing some time with us this afternoon to learn more about anonymous reporting and the role that it plays in an intelligence network. I have a great school year. I hope the weather is good where you are. It looks like the people in Boston are still going to be digging out. Hopefully that won't be a challenge that you face in your school. Have a great day, everyone. I look forward to speaking with you next month as we continue the webinar series. Goodbye. Thank you again.